Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Intervaith, and today I want to talk to you about raiding in World of Warcraft. Before I get started on that though, I wanted to take a quick second to say thank you to everybody that watched and liked and commented on my Guardian Druid Mage Tower video. I do have more Mage Tower videos coming your way. Mage Tower just went down like a day ago, and it's under construction right now. I have another challenge completed, and I'm working on a video for that, so that should be out soon. But today, let's talk about raiding. Okay, so raiding is really the ultimate goal for a lot of people in World of Warcraft. It's considered end game, right? And there's a lot of other stuff you can do that's end game content, but raiding is where like all the cool gear is, and it's generally what everybody wants to do. And the ideal raid situation is you're in a big guild that has a stable raid team, maybe a couple of stable raid teams, and they raid every week, and you have a great raid leader who's really super fair about distributing the loot, and everybody's happy. Everybody loves the raid, and it's just a great situation all the way around. But more likely than not, that's not the case. It's definitely not the case for me and for our guild. So I'm actually the guild master of a small guild on Ravencrest, US. We're an alliance guild called Meaty Ogres, which is also the name of this YouTube channel. And we're pretty small. We don't have enough for a full raid. So every time we raid, we have to bring in pug players. We're also pretty new to raiding. We only started in Nighthold, and I kind of became the de facto raid leader just by virtue of being the guild master. And I learned a lot over the like last three raids about being a raid leader. So I wanted to share some of that with you today, and maybe it'll help you if you're thinking about leading your own pug raid, or if you're going to join a pug raid. You might learn some things from the point of view of the raid leaders that are out there. Obviously, the first thing you want to do is start a group. Use the group finder tool and list your group, and then get ready for applicants. And then you're going to have to start making decisions once you get applicants about who you're going to accept into the raid. So for listing your group, just be honest about what your goal is. If you're progression, then say that. If you're a guild run, say that. If you're a one-shot group, or a quick run and you're just looking to get through everything quickly, say that. Point being, don't misrepresent your group. It'll help you out in the long run, because even if it might take a little longer to form, then the people that you do pull in are going to be people that are basically have the same goal as you, so your group is more likely to stay together. And also be patient when you're forming a group. It may take a little longer, but a good group is going to last longer and have a better shot at completing the raid than one that you just throw together pretty quick. Another tip that I would give you for forming a group is take more DPS than you need. So if you're going for like a standard raid comp of 239, for example, go ahead and pull in 1 or 2 extra DPS. Attrition and turnover is very high in a pug raid, and since the DPS represent the majority of your group, odds are pretty good that you're going to lose one pretty early on. They may not get the loot they want and just bail, or you may have to cut somebody loose because they're not putting out good numbers. So it's always good to have like a backup on deck, so you don't have to stop and resummon people after every boss. Another tip I would give you is don't force people to use voice chat. Unless you're on like progression or something really challenging, you can hopefully communicate what you need to communicate through in-game chat. So yeah, communication's important, but if you follow some of my instructions here, you should be able to communicate what you need to communicate without forcing people into voice chat. Now, if you want to make it optional, that's great. It's a great way to meet new players, but don't force it. And then last but not least, since we're talking about communication and how important it is. And bear with me here, because this might sound a little elitist or xenophobic at first, but I have a point. Be aware of the regionality of servers, and be aware which servers are regionally similar to your server in terms of your spoken language of choice. So what I mean by that is if you are in a predominantly like Spanish speaking realm and you're hosting a raid and you're going to be leading the raid in Spanish, it's in your best interest to only invite people that you know are going to have a high chance of speaking Spanish. Same thing, if English is your language. And this is really just for communication purposes. It's got nothing to do with like racism or excluding people. It's hard enough to get through a pug raid as it is. And if you have a language barrier thrown in there, it makes it even worse. So just something to think about. Okay, you're in the raid now. You formed a really good group. You're feeling good. You're ready to go fight some bosses. So your job really is to be the leader. I mean, you're not called the raid leader for nothing. Your job is to be a leader. So communicate with the raid. One of the main ways you'll do this is through the /rw command, the raid wide or raid yell as it's sometimes called. You definitely want to take advantage of this when you need to make sure that a point that you're trying to communicate gets through to the entire raid. I use it a lot during certain fights. For example, like Coven, I always raid yell like what the upcoming ads are. I don't take it for granted that people are watching their DBM timers. The next thing that you should always do, and it really demonstrates your authority and your knowledge, and it lets people know that you're in control, is give pre-fight instructions. And there's a super easy way to do this with an add-on that I'm going to show you a little later on that makes it not some long drawn out thing that you have to do. Another piece of advice while you're in the raid, learn how to give feedback to someone that's struggling without being a complete asshole. If someone's having trouble with a mechanic or their numbers are low or something like that, try whispering them and just being, offering some constructive advice like, hey, I noticed that you keep missing this mechanic, you're dropping this on the wrong side of the raid, please move it over here. And once you've given somebody a specific piece of instruction like that, consider that a warning. And then if they don't get the picture for whatever reason, maybe it's language barrier thing again, maybe it's just they're really dense, maybe they really just don't have any business being in a raid. If you give them a specific constructive piece of feedback and they don't improve, it's okay to cut them loose. And that's where my next bit of advice comes in, which is don't be afraid to be an asshole. Sometimes after you've been the nice guy, you've done good cop, well, then you have to do bad cop. Because at the end of the day, your responsibility is not to any one player in the raid. If you're the raid leader, your responsibility is to everybody. And it's to make sure that the run is successful. So if there's a person holding the raid back, you got to cut them loose. All right, this next tip might seem a little obvious, but learn how to use your raid frames. There's an in-game menu specifically for setting up raid frames. In particular, this is really important to healers that rely heavily on raid frames to kind of triage and figure out where to do their impactful spells. So make sure your tanks are marked in the raid frames. Make sure your groups are set up correctly. You can also use raid frames for when you have fights that require you to split the raid up into smaller teams. One example of this would be like Portal Keeper. If you're trying to figure out how to assign who goes up to the portal and who stays down to deal with the ads, it's very easy to just throw some people in a raid group and say, group 4 stays down, everybody else goes up into the portals. So find them, learn how to use them. Let's talk about add-ons. There are 3 add-ons that I'm going to tell you about today that are vital to raid leading, in my opinion. There are probably more than these, but these are the ones that I rely on to help me out. So the first would be Exorcist Raid Tools. I primarily use this to inspect people and look for problems in their gear and talents, and then also to help me figure out where potions and flasks and runes and that sort of situation lies. So you can use this add-on to do a raid inspect, and it'll show you everybody in the raid, and you can look and try to find problems, try to look for people that maybe have a real high bag eye level but aren't very equipped, equipped item level. You can also set it up to alert you when there are people not using potions or food or flasks or runes. And you can even have that stuff output to the raid. So depending on your style, you might want to keep that private or you might want to make it public. Take advantage of that. There's tons of other stuff in there that you can use. So that's just scratching the surface. But definitely check out Exorcist Raid Tools. Second add-on would be Angry Assignments. This is something that I just found pretty recently, and I love it. And if you recall, earlier in the video, I told you about giving instructions before every fight. Well, this is what I use to do this. So as I'm studying a raid, I go in and I make notes for every boss in the raid. I make like 3 to 4 simple, short statements about what to do in the fight. I try to narrow it down to the most important mechanics that cannot be messed up. Then using Angry Assignments right before the pull, I can open up the window and I can output my instructions to the raid with one click. So I don't have to sit there and retype everything every time. And I can even include like raid markers in the chat. So typically what I'll do with this is put down the raid markers, output the instructions, ready check, and then my tanks know at that point it's okay to pull if everybody's ready. And last but not least, you need some kind of DPS and HPS meter, details, SCADA, recount, whatever you want to use. But you should always be looking at this because it helps you if you have to make tough decisions about cutting low DPS or replacing a healer or something like that. I don't really ever do this unless I need to. If we're killing bosses and we're getting through the raid, then I don't worry about cutting DPS. But if we get stuck on something and we're enraging or we're just not, killing adds fast enough or something like that, then I can immediately go to my DPS meter, look and see who's underperforming, and give them a warning and then get rid of them. Last but not least, try to have fun. It can be demoralizing sometimes to to do pug raiding because despite all this preparation, despite all these tips and stuff, you're still going to have nights where you have a bad night. You have a bad run, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to chalk it up to the luck of the draw, and you just try again next week. Hopefully this stuff minimizes that a little bit. But at the end of the day, make sure you're having fun. Make sure that you like the people that you're raiding with. If you don't like the people you're raiding with, then you're not having fun, and raiding isn't really worth it at the end of the day. Why are you doing something that you're not having fun? So hopefully, now that you've heard this from my perspective as a sort of a novice raid leader, it'll give you some insight into what you might be able to do. As a pug raider, make sure you're applying for a group that's appropriate for what you're trying to do. If you don't know the fights and you're looking to learn, maybe wait around until you find a group that says, we're doing progression or we're learning this fight. Or be willing to start from the beginning with a group that just doesn't have a whole lot of expectations and work your way up. Make sure you're prepared. Show up to the raid with all the stuff that you need. Your own food, your own flasks, your own feast, Be ready. I mean, you're joining somebody else's raid. You can't expect them to provide everything for you and just, straight out carry you. Come and add a little value to the raid. So somebody shows up to a raid and puts a feast down. I'm kind of like, oh, cool, that's really nice. Maybe they're not the best DPS in the group, but they're adding some value. Be a warlock. It's you can get into any raid you want because pug raids always need a warlock. Pug raids need to summon often because the group needs to be remade often. Warlocks are super important. Plus you got cookies. If you have some advice for the raid leader, I would recommend maybe whispering the raid leader instead of blasting it in raid chat. Some raid leaders can get really territorial and feel like you're, threatening their authority if you start contradicting their instructions in raid chat or even suggesting alternatives to the fight. So, find a tactful way to be like, hey, just a suggestion, maybe try this. So recap, Mediocres, Alliance, Ravencrest, US, We're a small guild. We're always looking for new raiders that kind of have a similar attitude as we do. We primarily raid heroic. We're looking for people that just want to come and have fun and play their class and their spec at a reasonably high level. We're not looking for mythic raiders, but we're not looking for keyboard turners and spell clickers either. We're all grown-ups. We understand real life. So if you're interested in a raid environment like that, just hit me up in the comments, and I'll be glad to talk to you. Keep an eye out for upcoming videos. I've already said Mage Tower video number 2 for Balance Druid is coming out any day now. And I'm also planning on doing some content for Monster Hunter World. That's a super awesome game. I'm having a lot of fun playing that. Yeah, and feel free to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. Everyone, have a great day. I'm out.